Oops. Silly me, had the sticker on my camera. Okay, well, you can't quite see my shirt at the moment. I'll turn this back up, but it basically says I'm having a meltdown. And if you've been, whether you follow paranormal channels or you follow debunkers or both, you know that it's certainly been a drama-rama, lots of stuff happening kind of week. And I'm not addressing specifically any of the drama. For myself, it's been a bit of an up and down week as well. There have been some lovely surprises and nice emails that I've received, so that was a cool thing. I've had time outside in the yard and being able to sit and enjoy some of the weather. Today it's cloudy and cold and rainy, so definitely a good day to be indoors. And I've just been making some notes on different things that I want to cover and talk about, and I've got all my books kind of close by that I can pull forward. I still have a few of the fiction books that I need to cover. So next week, I should be having the videos up on Bellwether, and thank you, Timothy Collins, for that recommendation. It's a very enjoyable read. Hi, JP. How are you? Bellwether is a very enjoyable read. It talks about chaos theory, which is something I still need to make note of and read a bit about because it's something I'm definitely not familiar with. It's about two scientists. There's a lot of fascinating things in this book. And the author, I'm doing well, thank you. The author for this book, and right now her name's not coming to me, but she did a lot of research for this because every single chapter starts with some information about a different trend and when it was popular and what was happening with it. And it ties in beautifully with each chapter and our characters. And yeah, it was an enjoyable read. So I'll be putting that video up next week. I also have the Vampire Chronicles, a quick summary on the first and the last book in that series. And yes, I do remember when the Vampire Chronicles first began, the interview with the vampire. I read it when it first came out in 1976, right after Salem's Lot, which was written by Stephen King. So, yeah, I have both of those coming up next week. And then I'll be starting to focus more on some positivity and law of attraction type of things. Because December, for all the hype and everything else, and shopping sprees and what have you, it can be a very challenging month for people. So I figured, of course, I'm doing my Friday kitty videos, which I hope people are enjoying. And we'll be looking at how to stay in a positive frame of mind, different books, different things you can do. just reading JP's comment. Chaos theory is why your toast always lands butter side. Yeah, isn't that true? Yeah, I'm not really, I mean, I've heard of the term a few times, but I haven't really read anything specifically about it. So, yeah, I'll have to check that out for sure and see where that goes. Because lately I've been reading about string theory, and that's come up in a few of the different books in both Lynn McTaggart's work, The Field, and The Intention Experiment. It's come up, I think, in the Afterlife Frequency, and I know it's come up in a book I'm reading right now about space and time and all those concepts. So trying to wrap my head around that. It's come up in Irvin. It must be true. That's right. If Dan agrees with it, it must be fact. Uh, and yeah, he seems to know a bit about a few of the different um, theories and things out there for sure. As, what else had I just read? Irvin Laszlo. There are a couple of his books that I'll be taking a look at down the road as well. I've read them actually a couple of times, and it's trying to come up with how to explain and describe them because it gets into quantum theory. He talks about the Akashic field. I think he's another one who refers to there's a ZP something. I know it's 0 point, and I don't think it's time, but it might be. I don't know. It's been such a bizarre week in my brain's trying to process everything. Um, a few days ago, I found out that a channel that I'd been following for a couple of years. Now, I haven't watched them in quite some time because basically what I enjoyed there was the live chats. There was a lovely group of people. There was like zero drama, zero disrespect. Turns out, however, the content creators are not putting out genuine content. And there were little niggles and twiggles while I was watching them, but sadly, turns out should have paid attention to those niggles. And the one thing that I'm lucky is I didn't have money to pay for a membership, so I didn't lose anything in terms of money. But I've lost one of those things you can't get back, which is, of course, your time. So I'm a bit PO'd about that. There's another channel that I'm getting a little frustrated. They seem more interested in appeasing their trolls and reading the emails from trolls rather than focusing. Yeah, it was a paranormal channel, JP. And it's a bit frustrating. And I mean, again, I've been looking into the paranormal for decades, but the stuff they do was very subtle. I guess maybe the clue should have been they're on TV. And no, it isn't the tantruming trio from Chester. I knew there was something not quite up with them a while back and stopped watching. It was just their stuff. Yeah. It's frustrating because I had really hoped when I'd come on YouTube for more than just music, that there would be some interesting and respectable channels to follow. And now, I guess it's maybe 3.5 years that I've been watching content, not just listening to music. I've probably gone through about maybe 30 channels or so, and I'm down to watching about 3 and not much more. One channel that I do follow and will continue to follow is Seven Entity Paranormal, Joe Vitale. I think I've got that right. I know it's definitely Joe. His channel I appreciate because he is about the only one that I have seen who, when it comes to the Conjuring House, has been upfront about Bathsheba was not a witch. It irks me to no end that there are still people in the paranormal community going on about witches, and it's irksome because why is one group's spirituality content for the paranormal? That it's nonsense. There are people who follow an earth-based spirituality. They haven't started wars. They haven't massacred people by the thousands. And yet, when you look at some of these paranormal channels, it's, ooh, it was a witch, blah, blah, blah. They were dark. I'm not going to say there aren't some dark witches out there. There certainly are, sadly, because just like every other faith out there, there's some good ones and there's some bad ones. But the majority of people who follow, whether they call it witchcraft or Wicca, are not on the side of dark. They're very much into the environment. They're very much into the earth. They're very much into spreading light and love. And I really wish these paranormal people would stop with that nonsense. Dead Cold is definitely another channel that I continue to follow. Mark does an excellent job and takes things seriously. I've seen a few of Ghosts on Trent, but I haven't watched them regularly. And, there's other channels that I used to watch. Some I've stopped watching. Hey, Boss Mom, welcome. Oh, nice. I'll have to give him a thank you. It's a fairly new. No worries. The subjects vary from everything. JP, John Paul, describes me as eclectic, and that's probably the best way to describe it. I am a massive bookaholic. I read everything. I read fiction, I read nonfiction, vampires, science fiction, astronomy, positivity, law of attraction. I have a ton of subjects that I read about. I love other people making recommendations for books. And on my channel, you'll also find some of my nature videos as I'm out doing my yard work and hanging with my little critters. And I also have silly cat videos, and I've started posting those every Friday. And they're just very short little clips of my silly kids. We have 3 still with us, Panther and Xena and Tiki. And you'll meet them in some of the videos as you check through. And then I also have our other kids who we have sadly had to say goodbye to, but I have a ton of photos and great memories. So it's a combination of all of them. So I definitely have a wide range of things on there. And I always suggest that as people subscribe, they turn on the notification bell because maybe they're just interested in the uploads of my books, or what I call earthing, which is my yard work and being outdoors, or just the cat videos. So that way people know when there's content that's of interest to them that comes up. So yeah, we were, now I get why Mr. Gray sometimes says I lost my train of thought. And I even have a book next to me so that I cover certain points. Oh, yeah. See, now as I just looked over here, we were talking about different paranormal channels and just how frustrating it is because I've recently found out that a channel that I had followed wasn't actually legit. Makes me very sad. Thankfully, I didn't lose money. I feel bad for all these people who have sent out a ton of money to channels and then years later, you're welcome, boss mom. Years later, you find out that, they're just faking it. They're not actually trying to promote or share actual content. Another reason, and there's a few channels I've stopped watching as well, I'm tired of listening to the F bombs. I mean, I get that you're startled and things are heightened and maybe it slips out, but does that really need to be in the content when you've edited a video to upload on YouTube? And it frustrates me as well because these creators know people are watching videos with their children. And I mean, I get it. There are some people who talk like that in front of their children, but to me, it's just not something that you have to include. I mean, if it's a live stream and you're startled, okay, you can't edit that out. I get that. And maybe it's just because when I grew up, the F bomb was something that came out of your mouth when you were like really agitated or really shocked. Now, and it's not just YouTube, it's why I rarely watch anything on TV anymore, movies or programs. Now it's just everyday language. And, because I used to be an educational assistant, and for over a decade I was in high schools. And when I listened to students constantly drop in the F bomb, I would say to them, you need to learn more words. The English language has a whole lot of other words that you could be using instead of just throwing that in every other word. And you certainly can't speak like that at work. I mean, if your work is YouTube, I guess you can, but it tends to turn viewers like me off. There was one particular channel I used to follow, and I just finally stopped because I got tired of the constant barrage of overreacting, one, about nothing, and two, because repeatedly this person would mention that, they had people commenting to them or emailing to them about their language and could they clean it up. And they kept apologizing and saying how sorry they were, and then they were right back at it. So it's, what was the point of apologizing? You had no intention of changing your behavior. You go on about having children. You know that your viewers are watching this with their children because they've said it, in the comments, how they watch your show episodes with their kids. And my thought was, okay, do you talk in front of your kids like that? Like, seriously, and I'm just going to catch up on the comments. Yeah, I agree, JP, about the disrespect and boss mom. It's again, it's one of those, and I've heard some of the investigators say, And I agree. And sorry, I just have to adjust my legs here a bit. So sorry about the wiggling there, folks. But I agree with some of the individuals that I've seen. If you're out there doing an investigation, then think about maybe shoe on the other foot. If you were a spirit, ghost, dimensional being, whatever you call them, and you're trying to make contact, are you going to go up to someone who's like trying to get you all agitated and swearing and all of this other nonsense? Or are you going to approach someone who's being respectful and decent? I mean, to me, it would just be common sense to be decent and respectful. But then again, there's a reason that what used to be called common sense has now become referred to as rare sense, because it certainly doesn't seem that many people keep that in mind by any means, which is unfortunate. And I've mentioned this, I think, in a live stream, and I may have even mentioned it in one of my videos when I was covering the paranormal books. It was quite a shock to me. I mean, I'd heard of J.B. Rhine at Duke University, and I knew he had been doing studies on telepathy and psychokinesis because, as he said, obviously you can't take a ghost or some of the other paranormal phenomena into a laboratory, but he could test people for different abilities and skills. And that was back in the 1920s. I mean, here we are 100 years later, and a lot of this is still a mystery and unexplained by science. And sadly, with some of these shenanigans that have been going on and all the drama, it's no wonder scientists won't get anywhere near the field. I mean, you have the parapsychologists, and I know we have a few groups here in Ontario and no doubt throughout Canada, and I know there are a number of them in the UK as well, and organizations that have been trying to come up with answers and figure things out. And the parapsychologists are scientists. They've got university degrees, they've done special training to have that term. I took a parapsychology course through one of the correspondence schools. So, no, I'm not a parapsychologist. It was just a certificate. But it was fascinating to learn about astrology and the dowsing, I Ching, and there were ghosts. There was another section. So it was kind of cool to go through and study that. But I mean, the other unfortunate part of all this drama nonsense that tends to go on and all the infighting between investigators and whatnot is that the other scientists aren't going to step up and get involved in this because, they have to go through a process for funding dollars and grants. And if they're going to go for that, they want to be sure that there's something they can find and, be taken seriously. Sadly, at the moment, with all these other shenanigans, no one's going to put up funding for that type of thing. And it's unfortunate because by now, after all the groundwork that J.B. Rhine and others have done, we really should be a lot closer to figuring things out. And then you get the challenge of, you've got these, I can't think of the letters. It's the role-playing stuff, the different games in that, like Dear David, and that again is scary because there are people watching that. They have no idea that it's just a story that someone's telling. There was another one, it had something. I mean, it almost sounded like there'd been a massive something that happened to the earth, and I can't think of the name of it now. But again, like a lot of the paranormal channels that aren't investigators, I mean, they're based on the paranormal, but they're doing it for entertainment, which is fine. But the problem is, unlike, and I mean, Mr. Gray mentions them all the time, is Tim Morosoff. I think that's right. And he puts on the front of his videos that it's for entertainment purposes, and he does just fine. And I've mentioned before Supernatural. They ran for 15 seasons on TV. They were based on paranormal content. No one thought they were real. It was granted based on two characters, two brothers, but still, why the paranormal people don't just say entertainment only if that's what they're doing? They do just as well, and they wouldn't end up losing subs when, they get called out. Just going to catch up a bit here. I have to say, go. Yeah. Well, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, JP, because I mean, sometimes they do enjoy just having fun and to kind of lighten the mood. I don't know if that's to maybe not get themselves as freaked out. Dear David, it's a story that ran for a little bit, and I don't think that, no, that's not the doll. That's something else I'm thinking of. And it was a story about someone who was saying um, they were getting weird feelings about something in their room, and then there were pictures, and it gets closer. There's a series of and I can't remember what channel even put them up. And then of course it comes to the conclusion of this doll creature, whatever it was, up on the person's bed at night. But it was all made up and just to, give people a scare. Kind of like, and I'm just thinking of it because I saw an ad for it, the Chucky movie that's coming out now. I agree, boss mom, to be calm. And so, again, common sense things, right? Be calm, be respectful, and, be mindful of what it is you think you're trying to contact. And that's, again, going to determine some of what you think you've come across. Yeah, like a joke or a cash cow. Exactly. And that's what I think with when I've watched some of these, and they're so disrespectful. And because I've read the different books lately by investigators, and I've got one right here. Hopefully it doesn't. Here we go. Journeys into the Unknown. And this is by Richard Palmisano. He's a Canadian investigator and about 2 hours east from me. And he's been involved with the Searcher group. And I enjoyed reading this book along with a couple of the others by investigators because he, in one section, has stories of different things that have happened on the investigations. He goes through and talks about the different equipment and things they've used and how to conduct yourself. Oh, and there's a picture of him. How to conduct yourself during an investigation. But the one thing that he stresses, same with in 101 Ways to Find a Ghost, and I can't think of that author's name right now, and I didn't grab her book, unfortunately. She's an American investigator. And then I have the third one here, How to Hunt Ghosts, and this is by Joshua P. Warren. He's also an American investigator, but all three of them stress the importance of documentation and recording. And I don't know if any of these paranormal investigators keep records or think that the video is all there is. But honestly, if they're trying to find answers, they need to be documenting, whatever location they're going to. Things like what was the weather like, other what time of night was it, and that type of thing. And then they need to look at those records to see if they can find any correlations or other information that might explain what was going on. Was there a thunderstorm? That would certainly explain some of the booms and bangs. When I did my video on the ghost stories, there were quite a few things that had happened when there was a storm. And of course, you get all those negative ions and things. So it's trying to take a look at all of that to see, is it something to do with the storms and negative ions? What kinds of things? And this is where I really love watching Dead Cold Paranormal. Mark does an excellent job of not just looking at the building he's going to, but what was the overall history of that location. Because if there's something there, it doesn't mean that it's based on what's standing there now. There have been a lot of things that have happened over the history of mankind. I mean, we were watching a program last night. Actually, I just started watching this series. It's called World's Most Haunted. It's available on Prime. And, it talks about, I think was the one episode, actually, it was interesting because the first episode had to do with the Rams Inn, which I've seen investigated by a number of different groups. So it was interesting to see a different take on that. And this episode had the owner as well. And she was talking about her experiences as a child and her dad, who had owned the building for since I think it was 1968. Then the other episode was in Ireland. And yeah, Leap Castle. And I'll have to look through. I think I've seen um, the pattern of the. Oh, this actually, a friend made it for me, and it's in. Yeah, it's not let's see if I can, it's not in a straight line, and she made it in all these cool, shapes, and it was, yeah, in all my favorite colors. That's funny. But, yeah, so on Canada and not Canada's, World's Most Haunted, and I'm looking forward to there's a few more episodes. I think there's only 10 in the whole, series, because that's what happens on streaming versus TV. But the one thing that really irritated me, and it was funny because last night my husband's like, "Okay, we're not watching this anymore," because he could tell I was getting agitated. See the image that people get, right? Pareidolia type stuff. We all see different things in different shapes. But yeah, so on this series, there are three paranormal experts. So that, first of all, made me laugh because I'm thinking, how can you be an expert in the paranormal? One, there are no clear defined definitions. Two, there are so many different things and ideas that fall in within the paranormal, but so that just set me off from the get go. as much as I'm just laughing about John Paul's frog teeth. Oh yeah, see, so you got him over here. Um, but it did irk me. One, because one of these three experts, um, I think it was in the first episode, she was talking about a poltergeist, and her definition for poltergeist was a noisy spirit. And I know I said it out loud. It didn't just end up in my head as we were watching. I'm like, are you kidding me? You call yourself an expert, and yet back in, and I'll have to look at my book, Poltergeists, and no, they're way over on the other bookcase. As of, I think it was in the 1970s, maybe in the 1980s, but the parapsychologists defined poltergeist activity as psychokinesis, and typically involving a young adolescent, although it can involve an adult. In other words, you cannot have a poltergeist without a physical human presence, and that person is unconsciously generating that energy. So it frustrated me that here is the so-called expert who isn't even up to date on the latest definitions based on parapsychologists. And it was just like, oh, so this nonsense of you call yourself an expert, but you're not actually up to date on the latest terms is very frustrating. Like, it's little wonder there's so much confusion and different ideas and interpretations. And I think really until there's some way to bring some of that together, it's just going to be so hard to figure things out and be taken seriously. The one thing I am grateful for is at least now you can have a discussion about it, because when I was growing up, you certainly didn't talk about, seeing ghosts or communicating with ghosts and that type of thing. But yeah, so I did want to mention about World's Most Haunted. Another thing that I wanted to mention, and I've done my deep dive on Worker in the Light, and as well the other book by George Newry, Talking to the Dead. But in particular, Worker in the Light with William J. Burns. With all the shenanigans this past little while, this past week, 2 weeks, within paranormal and that, William J. Burns used to be the host of a TV show that I haven't seen, and I don't know if it's still on Prime or not, but it was about UFOs, and they'd run for 3 or 4 seasons. Now, unfortunately, what happened is they had run an episode, and it turns out that the objects were not UFOs. They were actually generated by, I think it was 3 young men who came forward and admitted what they had done to make it seem like there were UFOs. And that, of course, proved shade all over William J. Burns, brought everything he had done or found into question, whether it was authentic, all the rest of it. So when people do this kind of stuff, they don't stop to think about the ripple effect and the consequences. It's whether they're doing it for their own money or what have you, the problem is they end up there's that ripple effect. It's like when I see some of these episodes and they're trespassing. And I don't know, maybe in the UK it's seen different than it is here in Canada. But it just boggles my brain that these people are bold as brass, and it doesn't even bother them that, again, they included in the video that they're trespassing. They show you that there's CCTV monitoring this. And I'm thinking, okay, if you're willing to break the law and be so brazen about it, then why would we believe that the other stuff you're doing is above board? And maybe that's just me. But I think if you don't have a problem breaking the law, then maybe you don't have a problem faking stuff either. Again, it brings stuff exactly, Mimi. They're also, and that's the other that I find very frustrating when they go into these buildings. To me, one, it's shocking, even whether it's a home or old businesses, hospitals, what have you. The amount of stuff that is just left in those places is just mind blowing, especially for like hospitals and offices. I mean, I was at a high school when we closed it, and you had to make sure everything was out. You didn't leave old records and furniture and everything sitting around. So, and yeah, then people just go in and you see the vandalism. I know there was one, um, uh, it was one I just saw a few weeks ago, and it's a newer channel that I had just found, and I can't think of their name right now, but they'd been there a couple of months before, so I haven't seen that video yet. And they'd gone back, which I think makes sense. You need to go to a location more than once. But they'd gone back, and the place was just trashed. The windows had been all smashed out. There were massive holes in the wall, the furniture and items that, I mean, it was just horrific. And I'm thinking, one, and I know homelessness is an issue, not just here in Ontario, but a number of places. And I look at all these empty places and I'm thinking, why can't they be fixed up and provide some housing? Like, why are so many of these places, and not, just in the UK, we have them here in Ontario and Canada as well. Why aren't these places being fixed up and, you know, turned into something useful and beneficial to people? Like, it really does boggle my mind that some of these locations and things they come into. But another thing that I wanted to share, and this is from the How to Hunt Ghosts by Joshua Warren. And I'll be doing a closer look at his book. I haven't done the video. Yeah, I agree, Mimi. It is the same. There's, our governments and these politicians need to start getting their priorities straightened out for sure. Oh, that I just saw that, I think, last night. And one, between the damage that was done, but two, I'm not sure. It just really almost crosses a line of putting that content out. And maybe it's just me, but it was debunking to an extent, but there's a line there as well. And I'm not saying, well, I don't know what I'm saying. That video left a really uncomfortable feeling for me because it's one thing to me, and this is just me. It's one thing to take apart a video and, show mass or inappropriate behavior, what have you. It's another to put up content like that is just going to start a shitstorm. And I mean, I get it. Part of it for some of these channels, especially with that issue right now, is there are a number of channels who are gaining a lot of views and a lot of new subs because they put those two names into the title. And so people are clicking like crazy, and it's just, yeah, it's causing a huge um, bunch of shenanigans along with the other two who they were just with. And that's caused a whole other spiral. And I mean, the unfortunate thing is what's being lost is the paranormal investigation because a bunch of people are all focused on the drama-rama. And I don't think you were there the other day, John Paul, when Mr. Gray had a live and he was talking about, he's getting a little tired of some of the stuff and the drama and, maybe doing something different for a little while. This was before I found about the group that turns out to be fake after all. But I suggested, what about shouting out the smaller legit channels? And, he was saying too, the downside to that is you may think it's a legit channel, and then you suddenly find out that they're faking. So it's so hard. Yeah, it's exactly it. Yeah, disenchanted. I agree. Not just that. That's very true, Mimi. It's that's I mean, and that's the sad thing. There are some amazing people in both of the communities, paranormal and debunking. But you have some of, like any group, some of the bad eggs. Um, just like when I was saying earlier with, the witches, and they always get cast in the bad light because the dark ones, A, get views, and two, that's what people want to focus on, yet they're far and few between. And unfortunately, same with paranormal and debunking. You have some who know their limits and play within it, shall we say. They're legit, they're decent people. They're just trying to go about their business. And then you have some bad eggs who go above and beyond, and they end up smearing the whole community. And, again, that comes down to actions and words have consequences. And it just spirals out from there. Exactly, Mimi. I'm the same. I mean, I watch The Shape partly because I get sarcasm. I'm sarcastic. I watch World of Mr. Gray. I've seen some of Parples and Beardos and Side Eye Guy. But I agree. I watch for the content of the debunk, partly because I've learned, from the World of Mr. Gray and The Shape, I've learned a ton about editing. Not that I know how to do maths or any of that yet, but I understand now how different things are done and generated. The Dramarama, I have new interest in. Yep, exactly, JP. Exactly. They're, all these shenanigans, and it's the little ones who get caught in the crossfire, unfortunately. There was one thing that I did, and this is again from this thing, and a lot of the investigators don't charge money. I mean, even Ed and Lorraine Warren didn't charge for their investigations. Their money came from their books, the movies, their workshops, etc., but they didn't charge to do an investigation. Now, this author says, I find it almost insulting when someone says, I don't deserve to be compensated for my time and experience. Every other type of researcher gets paid. No one criticizes biologists, chemists, astronomers, or physicists for being compensated. And when I read that, my thought was, you're right, they don't. The difference between a paranormal investigator and the groups that he mentions is those people had to go to university, pass exams, and earn a degree, and then get hired to do that job and get a salary. In terms of paranormal investigation, all you need is 2 feet, a heartbeat, and a camera. There is no certification. There are no credentials required. I mean, hell, I could pick up my camera, go find a location, and call myself a paranormal investigator. And therein lies the problem of, to me, charging people for that service. One, you're charging for something that isn't even understood. So, for an example, when he mentions astronomers, we know there's stars in the sky. We know there's machines to figure out and technology. I just watched a program last night on Voyager 1 and 2, and I remember when Voyager 1 launched. I was just a kid, and Voyager 2, and, Carl Sagan was my hero. Loved listening to him and watching his programs. And, you know, there's information there. Astronomy is not a, I wonder what if. Same with, he mentions chemists. We know that there are different compounds and elements, and there's a certain process that you follow to become a chemist. You can't just, wake up one morning and say, hey, I think, I'll call myself a chemist today, and off I go. And, so I personally disagree with this particular author investigator's interpretation of why it's okay to charge. I mean, I get now the other thing I did like his book. Other than that, in the first section, which I think is excellent, he goes through and talks about what are imprints, what are auras, what are ghosts. He also goes with the concept of poltergeists. Actually, and I've got it on because he has a glossary at the back, which is excellent. And he says with poltergeists, an entity or energy that displays sensational interaction with the physical environment and manifests only when a specific individual or individuals are present. So, again, going back to that psychokinetic issue. And again, it's, not that people do it consciously, it's a whole lot of stuff that we don't quite understand, but it does happen around certain individuals. The big question, of course, is why can you take two individuals, stressful situations, same age, same environment, etc.? One ends up having poltergeist activity, the other one doesn't. And that's where this stuff becomes yeah, your head just kind of spins because why does it happen with one and not the other one? Is it something genetic? Um, is there more to it? Is it that the one individual's more open to, whether you want to call it realms or the other side, what have you? There's so many questionable things. The other thing that was really great, and it's kind of too bad Mr. Gray isn't here today, but I'll be doing this book, well, and he may or may not see that video. A lot of the times people ask, why do investigators go out at night? And this chart explains it perfectly. It has to do with, of course, electromagnetic fields and the electromagnetic winds and the different things that you can pick up. And again, that comes back to there's so many other factors when you're trying to figure out the paranormal. It isn't just going to a building and trying to get a shadow person, coming through a doorway. And I've often said, damn, I wish I'd invested in a black cloak company because I'd be rolling in the dough at this point. Because it doesn't matter where, and I used to watch the top fives, and it doesn't matter where these shadows show up. They're all wearing the same cape with that hood. I could have made a ton of money having an Amazon store for black capes or something. But, it's yeah, I'm not sure if social media has helped in terms of moving the paranormal forward or if it's actually done it more harm because of all the shenanigans and other things happening. And that's unfortunate because there are some really good people out there. I guess the one upside is that we've got people that you can connect with and have some adult and mature conversations with. You can agree to disagree without it becoming, a big brouhaha because we've all had different experiences and ideas, and that should be okay. You know, the moon for sure. Actually, I don't know. That's an interesting question, Mimi, is in terms of the moon, because, would that have an impact on the magnetic field? Does it have an impact on the people? I mean, we know it certainly has an impact on water levels and the tides. And that's just it. There's so much that we really don't understand. I mean, they know gravity is a thing, but the scientists can't tell you what it is or why it's a thing. They just know that it is. Um, we've got Einstein, who was brilliant, and his different theories, and, his theory of relativity. And then now we have string theory, and quantum theory is not new. It has been around for a long time. It's just that a lot of these things are now becoming common knowledge or out in the public. And yeah, there's still a lot to figure out for sure. Just laughing about the hooded black capes. But, there's so many things to factor in, and time of day, what's going on in that particular environment, what happened on that land prior to the building, whatever that they're investigating and checking out. It was the one book, and I don't have it here right now. And again, I just need to sit down, get some of my books and start going through note by note. It was the phenomena. And I really do want to look more into that. And again, you get two different sides of things, right? But in the Philip phenomena, what happened is, and I can't remember the school that they did it at, may have even been here in Canada. And so they came up with this idea of they were going to make a ghost or believe about this certain ghost, and they wrote out the back history and the story. Um, and then they started doing communications. Now, the funny thing is, the ghost changed the narrative that they had written for it. So it wasn't following along with what they were believing this ghost should be like, which made them stop and wonder about what was going on. But I've also read a study of the exact opposite, and it was again another study at, I think, a university. And so they told these people that this particular building was haunted, and here was this person. They, gave them details, sent them in to have their experience. And wow, lo and behold, what they experienced was exactly the backstory that they had been given. So again, you've got the two different sides there. Every time. Well, and I mean, it's not just animals that behave different during the full moon. I mean, people do as well. And I know they say it isn't proven or anything like that, but I worked in group homes, I worked in schools for years, and what I can tell you is I never needed a calendar to tell me when the full moon was coming. People who work in hospitals, definitely in the emergency rooms, can tell when it's around the full moon. There are a lot of different things that happen. And again, whether that has to do with changes in our magnetic field, whether it has to do with the pull of the moon and things close, I really don't know. But, you know, I personally, I know from experience, the number of incidents that would happen, or the number of disagreements, or people just getting agitated. Impacts dreams and dream recall. So I think there's definitely something to it. Speaking of the two sides, and I need to finish my notes on this, and this will be coming up. The Afterlife Frequency, this is by Mark Anthony, and he's a medium. Interestingly enough, he's also a lawyer. The scientific proof of spiritual contact and how that awareness will change your life. Now, the foreword to this is written by a scientist, Gary Schwartz, who also comes up in the other book I read, The Intention Experiment by Lynn McTaggart. So that was an interesting read. And as I say, he's a lawyer, so that's quite interesting. But the book that I want to do the deep dive as well, so I'll present these two in a video together. This is Paranormality: Why We Believe the Impossible. And this is by Professor Richard Weissman. And his claim is this proves why there is no such thing as the paranormal. So I enjoyed reading. Now, this one I found at my local thrift store, which was great, $5. I can swing that. The Afterlife Frequency I first borrowed from my public library,